Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to our webinar, Seafood Hazards, Know the Considerations. I am Ellis James Leng, and it is my pleasure to welcome all of you today. Let me just remind you of some details for today's session. Microphones. Please keep your microphones on mute when you're not speaking to minimize background noise. Questions and engagement. We encourage interaction. Use the raised hand feature if you'd like to speak, or post your question in the chat or at the question and answer segment. In relation to technical support, if you experience any technical issues, please send a message in the chat and our support team will seek to assist. Again, we remind the persons to be on mute, but certainly while you're speaking, to have your phones and notifications off. If you could silence them so that we avoid disruptions during the presentations. Again, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fourth in this ongoing series of food safety webinars hosted by the Quality Institute of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. The Bureau of Standards Jamaica hosts several webinars on a range of topics from manufacturers, food processors, and importantly, for consumers. Today's food safety session is titled Seafood Hazards, Know the Considerations. This series is part of the mission of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, the Bureau, the BSJ, a primary entity in Jamaica's national quality infrastructure, and an agency of the Ministry of Industry, Investment, and Commerce, Jamaica's business ministry, to transform Jamaica's food safety culture, not just among the producers and processors, retailers, but also, very importantly, among consumers, because that's every one of us. We've previously explored topics such as food safety culture, conformance or compliance, food safety impacting health, managing food allergens, foodborne parasites, hidden threats in what we eat. Today we turn our attention to seafood, a staple in many Jamaican households and a critical part of our agriculture and export sectors. In addition to our regular fare of fish and for some lobster, more Jamaicans are exploring the exotic seafoods, oysters, octopus, the lionfish, just to name a few. Many of our citizens may not know that many exotic seafoods contain many harmful substances, including natural toxins and, yes, environmental pollutions, which can cause harm to consumers. I can say simply that as a child, I always heard talk in Trelawney to be careful of eating barracuda because this particular fish could be poisonous if not stored or treated properly once caught by the fishermen. So I can tell you, and maybe today the scientists will help change that perspective, but I do not want to have barracuda. Today, I'm sure I'll learn of others and may very well add a few more to my do not eat list unless they can prove otherwise. Ladies and gentlemen, today's session is especially timely as we approach World Food Safety Day. Yes, World Food Safety Day is being marked on Saturday, June 7. Every year on June 7, the global community joins to celebrate World Food Safety Day, and this year we observe World Food Safety Day under the theme Food Safety Science in Action. Food safety, ladies and gentlemen, is more than passing an inspection or getting a good audit. It's more than washing your hands, foods, and countertops as you prepare a meal. It's about developing systems that every employee, from farm to fork, or in this case, from sea to fork sees themselves as part of. In fact, it is more than just about employees. It is importantly about us, you and me, the everyday man and woman. It's about protecting not just institutions, but lives. I'm happy to guide you through choppy waters on the high seas today. As I said earlier, I'm Ellis James Sleng, the Public Education and Customer Service Coordinator at the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, and happy to be your captain for the next 90 or so minutes as we embark on this voyage of exploring seafood hazards. Know the considerations. Let us begin the proceedings today with a word of prayer, which will be offered by Mr. Lascelles Tolo, Manager, Packaging, Non-Metallic and Furniture Branch at the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. Mr. Tolo?
Thank you, Ellis. Good morning, all. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, as we are gathered here this morning to hear about hazards in seafood, we pray, Heavenly Father, that as the presentations go forth, our understanding will be open and we will be able to comprehend in a simple manner what is being said. We will be able to apply it in our day-to-day lives and make our space a safer place for us all. We thank you for all the presenters who will be presenting, mighty God. We pray that your wisdom, knowledge, and understanding will be evident in them through their presentations. And for the listening audience, we pray, mighty God, for attentive ears in all these matters. And we pray for the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, who are the host of this event. Bless also the presenters and all persons involved. In the name of your dear Son, we pray. Amen, amen, and amen.
Amen. Praise the Lord, Pastor Tolo.
Thank you, Sir Ellis.
As we continue this morning's session, we are very privileged to have greetings from senior officers of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. We will hear greetings initially from Dr. Velton Gooden, Executive Director of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, to be followed by Ms. Tafara Smith, Director of the Standards Division. Dr. Gooden, please proceed.
Good morning. Let me first pause to acknowledge our moderator for today, Mr. Ellis Leng. Also, our distinguished speakers on the panel for this morning, Ms. Alison Richards, as well as Dr. Raymond Reed. Also, the many invited guests that are here today on the Zoom platform, as we look forward to a very informative and interactive session. So we're here today to talk about hazards in seafood. And if I could just have my first slide. Nice. So we know that the seafood plays a very important part, not just in the Jamaican economy, but worldwide. It's a very important part of industry. So our UN FAO report for 2024 indicates that about 3.3 billion people around the world get at least 20% of their daily animal protein intake from fish. And in Jamaica, we know of the many fishing villages that are around the island. One is downtown, we know one in Old Harbour. Then there's Marda that many of us stop to have our fish and bami, and in Old Harbour as well. So again, we can speak to these different fishing villages and the importance that it plays in the local communities. Now, as you can see displayed in this slide, there are many important nutrients that we derive from seafood. For example, we derive omega-3 plus fatty acids, which are very important in brain development, cognition, and for our immune system. Then there is vitamin A, which is very important for growth, also in terms of our eyesight. Zinc plays a very important role as a catalyst in many of the biological reactions that are needed to sustain life. We get calcium from seafood, which is important for bone development. Then we also get iron. Iron is also a very important source of seafoods, are a very important source of iron, which is important for blood, in particular the red blood cells, and protein, which are a natural building block for our bodies. So next slide. So given the importance of seafood, then, why are we here to have a discussion around seafood, and in particular about the hazards that are present in seafood? Well, as you would have heard the moderator said, notwithstanding the importance and the benefits that we derive from seafood, there are a number of different toxins that are present in seafood. Please go back to the previous slide. And these include naturally occurring toxins such as ciguatoxin, saxitoxin, and domoic acid. So these toxins arise because many of the fauna and flora, algae in particular, that many of the smaller species of these aquatic animals feed on, they bioaccumulate. And so when the bigger fish of commercial value consume these smaller species, they in turn are present, and therefore when we consume them as humans, then we stand the risk of being affected adversely by them. And then also a number of different types of heavy metals, copper and mercury in particular, also bioaccumulate. And then with the climate change that we are currently experiencing, and improper disposal of waste, there is the issue, ever-present issue of microplastics that are also present. All of these are important. One, because they are pathogenic. They are pathogens, meaning that they're disease-causing. They can cause vomiting, diarrhea, and many of them are neurological in nature in terms of how they affect us, and they may even lead to death. So it's important for us to talk about them, how we can protect ourselves, and how we can protect the industry, and how we can ensure that the fish that we harvest, can actually meet the market requirements with respect to residual levels of these very important hazards that are found in seafood. Next slide. So what makes the issue even more important, as you can see, is the expanding global trade. Recently, I was listening to a news item, and it reported that a lot of exotic species are now entering into the country and into our space. Recently, also, we learned about the invasive lionfish that also, again, is proliferating in our waters. And so because of this, what was a far distant issue or topic has now come center stage, and we need to talk about them. So the risk, therefore, extends to us in Jamaica, and therefore we at the BSJ want to ensure that Jamaicans are aware of these potential risks associated with the consumption of these seafoods. And so here we can share with you some statistics relating to the this fishing industry, and why it is important for us to consider the hazards that are contained in some of these species. Can we have our next slide? So just sharing some numbers with you. Now, Jamaica's fishery production amounted to about 30 billion for calendar year 2023, representing just over 1% of our gross domestic product. Also, the total production from marine captures and aquaculture was just over 14,583 metric tons, valued at approximately US 195.3 million. Now, fish consumption in Jamaica, as measured recently in 2021 reference work, shows that it is amounting to about 27.6 kg in 2021. Jamaica also exports a lot of fish and aquatic related products. For example, we export tuna. We have a vibrant conch and lobster export. In fact, the lobster season has just opened, and so the exporters are very active now in terms of harvesting lobster for export primarily to Europe. So as you can see, and as demonstrated by these figures, it's a very important industry. And so not only for local consumption, but for exports. And so it's very important that we have the discussion, protect ourselves, as also to facilitate export if it is that we're in this industry. Next slide. So we cannot have a discussion about any topic on the Bureau of Standards without talking about standards, can we? So the rules, policies, standards, and compliance and regulations are topics that we are constantly talking about. And as we explained before, with the world becoming essentially a global village, and food and other products are traded almost worldwide, standards are very important. So recent regulations on seafood, as an example, are focusing on stronger monitoring and control of natural toxins, Segura toxins, domoic acid, toxins, as we mentioned earlier, and of course the heavy metals such as mercury, copper, and microplastics as well. So limits on these substances are being tightened based on new scientific evidence. And with the advent of climate change, the impact is even more evident. So strategies including seasonal fishing restrictions are some of the strategies being used in order to contain and to mitigate the hazards that arise from some of these toxins. Enhanced traceability requirements are also being introduced to ensure transparency throughout the seafood chain. International bodies are also harmonizing standards to facilitate safer global trade while enforcing and also making sure that the consumers are educated to protect themselves and also to protect public health in general. So it's important that we talk about this. And today, next slide, we will learn some more about the tests that are done, some of which are done here in Jamaica. I know that for sure some of the biotoxins that we test for to facilitate export, some of those tests are done overseas. It would be nice to see that we have the equipment and the trained personnel to do all our testing here. That's something that we are striving to achieve. Also, to ensure that we understand the impact when we don't take care of our environment and maybe the mycotoxins, as well as the warming of the global temperatures occur, which can have a negative impact on our fish stocks and can affect the proliferation of these biotoxins. So this discussion aligns perfectly with the theme of World Food Safety Day. And the theme for this year is Food Safety, Science in Action. So today's program is a practical example of how science helps us to detect, to understand, and manage seafood-related risks, transforming data into decisions that protect the public health and build consumer trust. So let's dive into today's session with one goal in mind. What is that goal? Well, ensuring that seafood remains a safe, nutritious, and a sustainable part of our diets through the power of science in action. So thank you very much for joining us today. As the moderator said, we expect you to interact. We expect the questions to come at the end, and please enjoy the rest of the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gooden. Certainly, one of these days, we will need to invite the Executive Director of the Bureau of Standards to allow Dr. Gooden to come and to be one of our main presenters. As you listen to his opening presentation, the wealth of knowledge that he himself shares, we are sure that our ED will be prepared to release Dr. Gooden to the QI for one of our sessions one of these days. And with that said, we invite Ms. Tafara Smith, the Director of Standards Division at the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, to offer her comments. Ms. Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Ling, and good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dr. Gooden, for your remarks and for emphasizing the importance of today's webinar as a tool for capacity building and public awareness on today's topic. It is truly a pleasure to welcome all participants and panelists to today's webinar, Hazards in Seafood, Food Safety Considerations. I am Tafara Smith, Director of the Standards Division at the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, and I am delighted to join you as we observe World Food Safety Day under the theme Science in Action. This theme could not be more fitting. At the BSJ, science forms the bedrock of our work. Whether we are developing national standards, testing products, or equipping stakeholders with the knowledge to apply those standards in practice. Science is not a separate discipline. It is embedded in every facet of our standardization activities. Let me take a moment to highlight how science is translated into action across our work. In standards development, scientific research and data are used to define safe thresholds, technical requirements, and best practices. For seafood, this includes evidence-based limits for toxins like heavy metals informed by toxicology and food safety risk assessment. In conformity assessment, scientific methods are underpin product testing, inspection, and certification to determine compliance with standards. Testing for ciguatera and scrumbotoxin poisoning risk, for example, relies on precise scientific protocols. In metrology, science ensures that our measurements are accurate and traceable. Temperature monitoring of seafood storage, for instance, requires calibrated instruments. Any deviation can compromise food safety. Let's look at standards in trade. Adherence to internationally recognized science-based standards enables Jamaican producers and products to access global markets, supporting both food safety and economic growth. And importantly, under the Standards Act, the BSJ is mandated to encourage or undertake educational work in connection with standardization. This speaks directly to our responsibility to promote public awareness and build capacity through training, especially in critical areas such as food safety. In alignment with this mandate, the Industrial Training Unit plays a central role in supporting food safety awareness and building national competence in science-based standards. We deliver training programs. We have several of them, including training in food safety. We have our SQF training that we are now launching and promoting and encouraging persons to take advantage of, especially in our early launch stage, where we're offering discounts in SQF training. We also promote workshops, or host workshops, and outreach activities designed to empower stakeholders across the food value chain, from producers to regulators, with the tools to implement standards effectively and consistently. That said, today's webinar is one such effort. As we focus on naturally occurring seafood toxins, such as ciguatera and scrumbotoxin, We are not just raising awareness, but also reinforcing the link between science, standards, and public health protection. So, as you engage with today's expert panel, I encourage you to reflect on the broader system we are all part of. A system where science fuels standards, standards guide practice, and practice ensures safety. Let us continue to put science in action for safer seafood, informed consumers, and a more resilient Jamaica. Thank you, Mr. Lang, and I'm wishing all our participants a wonderful session. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Smith. We appreciate the words from both Dr. Gooden and Ms. Smith. And let me take the opportunity to specially welcome the over 100 persons who are currently online. And I'm going to give you an opportunity at this point to participate by simply asking you to drop in the chat an emoji that reflects for you science, whether it is that you love it, hate it, kind of have a mixed relationship with it, or indicate the field that you're involved, the work that you do. Just let us hear from you in the chat as you share with us what you do as a scientist, how you benefit from science, how you relate to seafood. Are you in the business? Are you selling? Are you purchasing? Do you consume? Which seafood do you particularly like? Are you upset when it's close season for lobster and you can't get it? Or do you prefer to just get your conch soup somewhere? So we just want you to participate in that way as we seek to move now into introducing our panelists. Already, we have received so much information from Dr. Welton Gooden and Mr. Farah Smith that we know that they have just whet our appetites and just prepared us for the great main course that is to come. Our first panelist is Miss Alison Richards, widely known as a food safety girl. Ms. Richards is a passionate food safety advocate with an academic background in marine biology from the University of the West Indies, Mona, and specialized training in food toxicology and foodborne disease epidemiology from Michigan State University. She has extensive regulatory experience, including inspections of seafood processing facilities and monitoring of imported seafood to ensure compliance with food safety standards. Her contributions to the Codex Alimentarius Secretariat and the National Codex Committee reinforce Jamaica's commitment to global food safety standards, especially in this case for fish and fishery products. We are happy to have the food safety girl. I am telling you, I'm not the food safety guy, but with a track record like hers, I'm prepared to tag on to Miss Alison Richards. Make her welcome as she comes to present.
Thank you, Ellis. I chuckled to myself when you said you're not the food safety guy, and I think everybody is an agent of food safety change. So I'm welcoming you to the team. It's a good opportunity for me to be here, and I am rather excited to share on this topic today. Now, as Dr. Gooden said in his introduction earlier, there is an important reason why Jamaica should be paying attention to hazards in seafood. And we're talking about toxins today. And before I get into my presentation, there is a story I'd like to share with our participants today. I think coming from a culture of folklore, this is a pretty fitting story. So I'll be quick before I get into the presentation. One of the most mysterious toxin-related stories is that of Clervius Narcisse, a Haitian man who was declared dead, buried, and then returned to his family 18 years later. He claimed he had been fully aware during his burial and later enslaved by a local boko, a voodoo practitioner. Researchers believe his death may have been caused by exposure to tetrodotoxin, a powerful poison found in pufferfish, a key ingredient in the Boca's zombie powder. This toxin can slow heart rate and breathing to nearly undetectable levels, mimicking death without actually killing the person. Though the exact science of the powder remains unclear, Narcisse symptoms matched unknown effects of the tetrodotoxin poisoning, and his case remains a chilling example of how natural toxins can be used in mysterious and dangerous ways. So this was a case study I came across during my studies while at the Michigan State University, and I thought, what better way to share it than today to jumpstart this presentation that I have. We're focusing today on seafood toxins, and particularly from a Jamaican perspective. Now, as Dr. Gooden mentioned earlier, Jamaica does consume a lot of seafood, fish in particular, and the data coming out of 2021 is that we consume 27.6 kilograms per capita. And of course, our location in Jamaica has made it predisposed to a food culture centered around seafood, having, knowing that we have our fishing villages, across the island. Now, there has been an uptick in consumption of exotic foods, such as oysters, octopus, lionfish, and the others. Now, consumers can become oblivious to the hazards, the toxins in particular that are associated with these and other seafoods. Some data here is that fish poisoning, principally ciguatera and scombroid fish poisoning, which Tafara Smith mentioned just now, was responsible for 17.8% of all confirmed foodborne disease outbreaks listed by the CDC between 1978 and 87. Now, what are these natural toxins that we're referring to today? Naturally occurring toxins in seafood typically originate from marine microalgae, namely phytoplankton, or are biologically accumulated through the food chain. Now, there are three main sources of these toxins. First, we have our environmental factors. Toxin production and accumulation are influenced by our rising sea temperatures as a result of climate change. We have our nutrient runoff from agriculture, which is causing harmful algal blues, or HABs as we know them for short. And there is the incidence of overfishing, which of course changes the trophic level dynamic. Now, when the conditions are right, conditions such as warm temperatures, sunlight, and nutrient-rich waters, marine algae will multiply rapidly, growing into harmful algal blooms. Now, shellfish and some fish feed on these algae, and of course, in turn, accumulate their toxins in their tissues. Some examples of these toxins, which Dr. Good mentioned earlier, would be the saxitoxin from the Alexandrium species, which causes paralytic shellfish poisoning, which we'll get into in a bit. We have the domoic acid from the Pseudonychia species, and that causes the amnesic shellfish poisoning. And there's the ocadaic acid from the Dinophysis and the Prorocentrum, and that causes diuretic shellfish poisoning. Now let's talk about how these toxins interact on a trophic level or a food chain level. Now, there is the incident of bioaccumulation, and that is that some fish, especially the reef-dwelling species, they accumulate these toxins by eating smaller fish that have fed on toxic algae. Now, an example of this is the ciguatoxin. Though it's not produced by the fish themselves, it is coming from a type of algae found in coral reefs, and this toxin moves up the food chain and can end up in large predatory reef fish, such as our barracuda, or grouper, and our snapper. And you're seeing that photo on the right there that shows what's happening. That red denotation is indicating how the levels accumulate over time in bioaccumulation. And this is another image just showing an environmental factor, in this case, water pollution, exposing our amphibians to these toxins, the fish now eating these amphibians, and of course, we as humans, we consume them eventually. Now let's look at biomagnification. Though similar, I will get into the difference between both of them a bit from now. Now, biomagnification refers to the increased concentration of a pollutant as it moves through the food web from one trophic level to the next. Because of bioaccumulation, pollutants that have accumulated in the tissues of lower level organisms can then be transferred to higher levels when they are consumed. The effect is most noticeable in top predators, which have accumulated high levels of pollutants over their lifetime. And we're seeing another image here where you're seeing that as opposed to bioaccumulation, where we're talking about the accumulation of the toxin in one animal or seafood, we're looking where the toxins are now accumulating across trophic levels. Now here's a graphic representation of the difference between the two. So we're seeing at the top here where bioaccumulation is happening over time in one animal or one organism, where biomagnification, it's showing where the toxins are being moved along trophic levels. And of course, by the root word magnify means that it's getting more and more as the trophic level increases. Here's a quick table just showing the 4 basic features in terms of differences between the two terms. So the focus in bioaccumulation is an individual organism, while in biomagnification, that is the food chain. And our mechanism is that there is direct uptake or consumption with bioaccumulation. However, for biomagnification, it involves the consumption of organisms with accumulated substances. And for concentration in bioaccumulation, this increases within an individual over time, while as with biomagnification, it increases as it moves up the food chain. And an example is mercury in a single fish, and in biomagnification, mercury in a predatory bird after eating this fish. So for those of us who are familiar with sets in math, it's safe to say that bioaccumulation is a subset of biomagnification. Now let's look some more at our natural toxins. Now we've talked about how they get into our fish that we're consuming. So let's look at some of the features and let's get into the details. So of course, our natural toxins, they cannot be detected by taste, smell, or appearance. And of course, this is what makes it very tricky and dangerous. Now it's not destroyed by cooking, freezing, or drying, which also makes it extra dangerous. Now there are 6 recognized natural toxin poisoning syndromes that are recognized, and some of these poisoning syndromes occur from consuming contaminated fish and fishery products. So let's get into those. So we're going to be looking at these 6 plus a few other as it relates to venomous fishes. We're looking at ciguatera fish poisoning, amnesic shellfish poisoning, azaspiracid shellfish poisoning, diuretic shellfish poisoning, paralytic shellfish poisoning, and neurotoxic shellfish poisoning. And you'll realize that all 6 of these are predisposed in shellfish. Now let's look at the CFP, which is the ciguatera fish poisoning. So this poisoning is derived from ciguatoxins, and it's commonly related to the consumption of subtropical and tropical reef fish, such as our barracuda or grouper, or landfish, snapper, jacks, the trevally, which is a interspecies of the jackfish, or mackerel and or parrotfish. Now, this originates from the marine algae, as I mentioned before, and of course, ciguatoxins cannot be removed during processing or deactivated through cooking. Now, some of the symptoms associated with ciguatoxin is the gastrointestinal symptoms. We have 3 major types of symptoms. There's the gastrointestinal symptoms, which causes nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. We have the neurological symptoms, which involves the numbness and tingling of the lips and the extremities, the itching of hands and feet, joint pain, muscle weakness, reversal of sensitivity to temperature, which means that if you're drinking something cold, it feels hot or tastes hot, and vice versa. And there's also dizziness and vertigo. There's also the cardiovascular symptoms, which include irregular heartbeat and low blood pressure. The onset of these symptoms typically occurs within 6 hours after consuming toxic fish and may persist from several days to weeks. In severe cases, some neurological symptoms may persist for months and can recur for years. Now, fatalities do not usually occur from CFP. However, isolated fatalities have been reported. Now, let's look at the amnesic shellfish poisoning. This one is derived from domoic acid and it's associated with the consumption of molluscan shellfish, in particular, or mussels or scallops, razor clams, crabs, sardine, anchovy, and our albacore tuna. And it's most often associated with these particular bivalve shellfish. Some of the symptoms include gastrointestinal symptoms, which include nausea, vomiting, abdominal cramps, and diarrhea. And the symptoms develop within 24 hours of consumption. And in severe cases, the neurological symptoms may also occur within 48 hours of consumption. And we're looking at dizziness, headache, respiratory difficulty, disorientation, seizures, short-term memory loss, and even coma. Now, in severe cases, ASP should be considered life-threatening. Now, our third poisoning we're looking at is azaspiracid shellfish poisoning, short AZP. Now, these are derived from azaspiracids, and they're associated with the consumption of bivalve molluscan shellfish. And there we have, our oysters or clams. And this poisoning was first recognized following a 1995 outbreak of severe gastroenteritis in the Netherlands, which was linked to the consumption of mussels harvested in Ireland. Now, the symptoms, similar with like the others in terms of severe gastrointestinal disorders, you have your abdominal pain, nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. And the symptoms develop within a few hours following the consumption of contaminated shellfish. Now, these symptoms can persist for several days. However, AZP is a self-limiting disease, which means that it runs its course and resolves on its own without a need for medical intervention. So it is considered non-fatal. Then we have our diuretic shellfish poisoning, which is derived from ocadoic acid and dinophysis toxins. And generally, these are associated with the consumption of bivalve molluscan shellfish harvested in the Pacific Northwest and North America. So even though these are not in the tropical or in our Caribbean Sea, as Dr. Good mentioned earlier, Jamaica does import seafood. So, it's very important for us to keep these in mind and to be mindful. Some of the symptoms associated with DSP include gastrointestinal symptoms, the usual nausea, abdominal pain, vomiting, and diarrhea. And in addition, headaches and fever may also occur, and these are usually associated with dehydration. Now, the symptoms typically develop within 3 hours after consuming the contaminated shellfish and may persist for several days. Just like AZP, it is self-limiting and non-life-threatening. So, but due to the similarities of between the symptoms with DSP, it can be misidentified or misdiagnosed as a bacterial or viral illness. Then we have our paralytic shellfish poisoning, the PSP, and this is derived from saxitoxins. Now, in the US, it is most often associated with the consumption of bivalve molluscan shellfish, such as our clams or cockles, mussels, oysters, and certain predatory gastropods, such as our conch or snails and whelks, are also known to accumulate PSP toxins by feeding on toxic bivalve mollusks. So here we're seeing where biomagnification could be taking place. And gastropods may also retain the toxin for longer periods of time than our clams and our mussels and oysters, since they are slow to depurate the toxin. Now, paralytic shellfish poisoning has also been observed in echinoderms, referring in particular sea cucumbers and our cephalopods, octopus, and squid. Now, in 2002, the first reported case of PSP in the US was from the consumption of pufferfish, and this pufferfish was harvested from the central east coast of Florida. when it was identified. And there are PSP in other parts of the world have been known to be associated with mollusc and shellfish from tropical or temperate waters. Now, some of the symptoms of PSP include vomiting, abdominal pain, numbness, burning, or tingling of the face and extremities, incoherent speech, loss of coordination, muscle paralysis, shortness of breath, and in severe cases, respiratory paralysis. Now, respiratory paralysis can result in death if a ventilator support is not provided in a timely manner. The onset of these symptoms can develop within 2 hours post-consumption of the PSP toxin. So we're seeing where PSP is extremely potent. It gets you very quickly, as opposed to some of the other shellfish poisonings we've looked at earlier. And because it is extremely potent, it has a high mortality rate in cases where medical support is not available. Now, our neurotoxic shellfish poisoning is derived from brevetoxins, and cases in the US is generally associated with the consumption of bivalve mollusks, such as our clams and our oysters, from coastal waters of the Gulf of Mexico and sporadically along the southern Atlantic coast. We also have our ostropods, such as our whelk, which is harvested from the Florida Gulf, known to have caused cases of NSP. The symptoms are characterized by gastrointestinal illness, which include diarrhea and vomiting. There is also the neurological symptoms of tingling and numbness of the lips, tongue, and throat. There are muscular aches and dizziness, and the symptoms develop within a few hours of consuming contaminated seafood. And of course, treatment consists of mainly supportive care. Now let's take a look at we've looked at our shellfish poisoning diseases. Now let's look at some of our toxic fishes in particular. So we're looking at our venomous fish, and some fish, they produce venom. You know, we mentioned it earlier, our lionfish in particular. So our fish produces venom using specialized spines or other structures that cause adverse health effects in humans. Now, the fish venoms, are complex mixtures of proteins and enzymes known to have cardiovascular, neuromuscular, inflammatory, and cytolytic properties. They are produced in specialized glands associated with distinct venom delivery structures. Now, our lionfish. It's a known venomous species from the Pacific Ocean, and it recently has become invasive and overabundant along the US South Atlantic coast and in the waters surrounding our Caribbean island here. So several venomous fish species are top predators in the tropical coral reef food chains, and therefore have the potential to accumulate ciguatoxins in their flesh and internal organs in ciguatera endemic areas, and this is what causes the poisoning. The severity of the symptoms depends on the fish species, the amount of the venom delivered, and the age and health status of the victim. I like to say, as it relates to toxicology, and Paracelsus, which is considered the godfather of toxicology, his famous quote is that it is the dose that makes the poison. So of course, in this case, we're seeing that it depends on the amount of venom that is delivered by these fishes. Then of course, the severity of the symptoms may vary. Now, the most common symptom associated with this is the acute localized pain disproportionate to the size or severity of the wound. This means the wound is probably, you don't even see it, you just feel a prick, but the pain that you're feeling from it seems like something much more is happening. Now, the symptoms reaches its greatest intensity within 60 to 90 minutes, and if untreated, can last 8 to 12 hours. Systemic symptoms include dizziness, nausea or vomiting, difficulty breathing, chest pain, abdominal pain, hypertension, and generalized weakness. Now we have the ichthyohemotoxin, which is also called the eel blood poisoning, and that is found in the blood of a variety of different species of eels and considered a rare form of food poisoning. This disease manifests in two different forms. We have our systematic, which is caused by the consumption of fresh, uncooked blood eel, and topical. Now, symptoms associated with the systemic form include diarrhea, bloody stools, nausea, vomiting, hypersalivation, skin eruptions, cyanosis, apathy, irregular pulse, weakness, paresthesia, paralysis, respiratory distress, and possibly death. And the symptoms from the topical form includes a severe inflammatory response when raw eel serum comes in contact with eyes or the mouth. Now, oral symptoms include burning, redness of mucosa, or hypersalivation. Now, ocular contact invokes a severe burning sensation and redness of the conjunctivae, lacrimination, and swelling of the eyelids, and eye irritation in particular may persist for several days. Recovery is usually spontaneous, and of course, care should be taken when handling eels. Cooking has been known to denature the toxic properties. So we're seeing an exception here where we're talking about toxins not being able to remove them from cooking. So maybe in this case, cooking may have some denaturation effects. Now let's move on to the tetrodotoxin. And this is what the story I shared at the beginning of today's presentation was about this toxin in particular. And it's also called the pufferfish poisoning. Now, poisoning is usually associated with the consumption of the pufferfish from waters of the Indo-Pacific Ocean regions. And it has been extracted from other fish and other animal species such as xanthic crabs, marine gastropods, goby fish, newts, frogs, blue-ringed octopus, and starfish as well. Now, poisoning is characterized by symptoms including numbness of the lips, tongue, tingling sensation in the face and extremities, headache, abdominal pain, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, difficulty in walking, paralysis, respiratory distress, difficulty in speech, shortness of breath, blue or purplish discoloration of the lips and skin, lowering of blood pressure, convulsions, mental impairment, irregular heartbeat, and death in extreme cases. And if you remember my story from earlier, you would have recalled some of these symptoms that Mr. Narcisse experienced back then. Now, symptoms usually develop within 3 hours after consumption of contaminated fish and may last from 24 to 48 hours. Death from this toxin commonly occurs due to muscle paralysis, resulting in respiratory failure when ventilatory support is not accessible. Now, let's head on over to what Director Smith mentioned earlier, our scombroid poisoning. Now, this is derived from the scombrotoxin, and it results from the consumption of eating certain species of fish that have been time or temperature abused. So that means your fish would have already started decomposing and it starts forming spoilage bacteria that form biogenic amines such as histamine. Now, scombrotoxin producing fish include tuna and mahi-mahi. The onset of intoxication symptoms is rapid, ranging from minutes to a few hours after consumption. The duration of the illness is relatively short, with symptoms commonly lasting several hours, but in some cases, adverse effects may persist for several days. Symptoms include tingling or burning in and around the mouth or throat, rash or hives, a drop in blood pressure, headache, dizziness, itching of the skin, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, asthmatic-like constriction of the air passage, heart palpitations, and respiratory distress. Now, that comes to an end of our different hazard or diseases that are affecting our seafood as a result of toxin accumulation or venoms that they produce. What are the control strategies? How is it that we protect ourselves from becoming affected by these toxins and venoms and poisons that these seafood can have us predisposed to? First point is to understand seafood toxins. And I mean, this session in itself speaks to, you know, a control strategy, you know, introducing our stakeholders to what seafood toxins are like, how, you know, what is the epidemiology surrounding these toxins. And of course, consumers must be aware of naturally occurring seafood toxins to ensure their safety and well-being. Another strategy is identifying risky seafood types. So certain seafood species, as we've spoken about just now, are more likely to carry toxins, increasing the risk of poisoning. Our third control strategy I'm sharing with you today is safe consumption practices. Adopting preventive measures can significantly reduce the risk of exposure to seafood toxins. Another strategy is to cook our seafood thoroughly. For fish, cook until it's opaque, not translucent, and flakes easily with a fork and to internal temperature. So if you're using a thermometer, you want to make sure that the temperature is at least 145 degrees Fahrenheit or 63 degrees Celsius. For clams, mussels, and oysters, cook until the shells open and discard any that do not open during cooking. Temperature control. So before I get into temperature control, yes, I did mention that cooking these items does not get rid of toxins, but I want to reemphasize the importance, you know, on the eve of World Food Safety Day, that food safety is everybody's responsibility. So though we're talking about toxins today that may not or will not be able to get rid of via cooking, we will rely on harvesters to do that part, to ensure, you know, that they're implementing these strategies that we're gonna be looking at now. So our temperature control, of course, that is critical in the prevention of scombroid poisoning during harvesting, storage, and sale. So you want to make sure, you know, our fishermen are heading out with their igloos, you know, to keep these fish at a controlled temperature post harvesting and between sale. Our next strategy is harvest water management system. And this involves the management of water from which mollusks and shellfish are harvested. And what this does is minimize toxins. And harvest water management systems include shellfish sanitation program. And this is in particular a global effort, which is also practiced, I know it's practiced in the US and Canada. And what it does is ensure that growing waters meet required standards for safe consumption. And this involves the regular monitoring of water quality for bacteria, viruses, and toxins, and taking appropriate actions to address contamination. We also have controlling the source. So harvesting mollusks and shellfish from areas with low levels of contamination also reduces the risk of illness. And there is the practice of relaying. And what relaying does is it involves the moving of shellfish to cleaner areas with better water quality for a period of time to allow them to purge contaminants. And our fourth principle of harvest water management systems is high salinity treatment. So in some cases, high salinity water treatments can be used to reduce pathogenic bacteria levels in shellfish. Now, this may not directly reduce or eliminate toxins, but it can be used in conjunction with other post-harvest processes, like decoration or wet storage to reduce the risk of toxins reaching consumers. And my last strategy I'm sharing with you is licensing and regulation. As Dr. Good mentioned before, we can't be talking about, you know, hazards and food safety coming from the Bureau of Standards without the mention of regulation. So the licensing and certification of mollusk and shellfish harvesters and seafood harvesters and fishermen is pretty important, because I think a part of this licensing and regulation does involve the transfer of knowledge as to what the expectation is. And it also would include best practices, safe practices as to how to keep the end user, the consumers, safe. And that's it from me today. Thank you for listening. I have a short video to share with you before I go. And it is a video, I believe, that wonderfully wraps up the idea of the difference between bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Let me know if you are seeing or hearing.
This small fish gets eaten by a bigger fish, which gets eaten by an even bigger fish,
hearing
which
the
gets
video?
eaten by an even bigger fish, and that's how the food chain moves. But let's rewind. Small fish like sardines or anchovies, which are typically filter feeders, meaning they eat plankton and algae, but also tiny amounts of microplastics, biotoxins, and mercury that's floating around in the water. Then, a mid-sized fish like a mackerel or snapper doesn't just eat one sardine. It eats around 500 of these small fish per year. And with every bite, it absorbs the nutrients from the small fish, but also the toxins that the small fish collected. Now a tuna, a much bigger fish, eats 100 of these mid-sized fish per year. This is why a big tuna compared to a sardine can have over 50 times more mercury. This process is called bioaccumulation, and that's when toxins build up over time. But when a predator eats hundreds of contaminated fish, those toxins multiply, and this process is called biomagnification. And that's why the biggest fish, like sharks, swordfish, and king mackerel, have the highest mercury levels in the ocean. The bigger the fish, the bigger the risk. So when it comes to fish, I like to follow SMASH, the 5 fish that are low in mercury and high in omega-3s. That's sardines, mackerel, anchovies, salmon, and herring. These fish sit lower on the food chain, meaning they don't accumulate nearly as many toxins, making them some of the best choices for both nutrition and sustainability.
All right. I think that's the end of it.
All right, if you think so, we will be guided by that.
I'm not hearing the audio, so I'm not sure if the video has ended.
It's all right, fine. It seems to have ended.
Okay, thank you.
The bigger the fish, the bigger the risk. Thank you, Alison, for a very insightful presentation. Now, I shared earlier about the big fish, the barracuda. Now, no, say, based on everything that Alison has said, I don't want to eat no more fish. No more big fish. Lionfish, puffer fish, where them I go, is all right. I will stay with the regular liquor things then. But we now have more information, and so we are informed. We can make choices. And as we get this information, we can also ask questions of our suppliers. We can ask questions of the persons who are preparing our food. We can ask questions of the persons who distribute and who purchase from us. And we just want to correct or reiterate that the close season for the lobster is actually April 1 to June 30, and the season would therefore reopen. The open season is as of July 1. So between April 1 and June 30, close season for lobster, just to ensure that we make that correction. But thank you again, Food Safety Girl, for an engaging, enlightening, informative presentation. And we look forward to the questions that I'm sure will come from our audience later today. So, Chanceline, we ask you to hold the question. Just please note the question, or you can put it in the chat. We are going to facilitate questions after we have taken the second presentation so that we can manage our time today. But please note the question in the chat or write it down so that we can come back to you. Thank you very much. So with that being said, our next panelist, and we can ask him to get ready, is Dr. Raymond Reed, a senior chemical analyst at the University of the West Indies, Mona. Dr. Reed brings nearly 30 years of experience in analytical testing, research supervision, and university lecturing, particularly in forensic science and the Food Agro-Processing Master of Science program. He's a research supervisor for the Occupational and Environmental Safety and Health program, and he provides technical leadership of the Pesticide Research Laboratory, where he monitors pesticide residue in imported produce and analyzes environmental samples for toxic chemicals. Trained by the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons since 2004, he is also a first responder for chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear emergencies and has served as a laboratory assessor with JANAC Global since 2009. We're honored to have Dr. Raymond Reed with us, and we invite him now to make his presentation to us. And again, we remind our audience, please take note of your questions, drop them in the chat, or note them there so that we can get back to the discussion once Dr. Reed has finished his presentation. Dr. Reed, over to you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I am delighted to do this presentation this morning, and I hope that everyone will benefit from it. Just trying to upload. Okay, so just checking, are we able to see the slide?
You've started screen sharing. We're not seeing the slide just yet, but it is in process. It says you have actually paused screen sharing. So could you just double click and let us see if it comes up?
Okay, I double click.
Or you may just want to resume the process.
All right. So you want to stop sharing and start again?
Yes.
Are you seeing this slide?
Seeing it now, you could just go into presentation mode. Right.
All right. Thank
Great.
you. All right. So this morning, a lot have been said on hazards in seafood, and I will proceed to look on prevalence and testing in heavy metals and other chemicals in seafoods. I will focus more on the testing. So the webinar will explore critical aspects of seafood safety with a focus on toxins and chemical hazards. Now, the Department of Chemistry at the University of the West Indies, Mona, has two laboratories that have been involved in research involving toxins and commercial analysis of toxins in seafoods. And we have been involved in many projects. And on the slide, there is a publication which summarizes the results for a research project which occurred over a period of about 5 years. And during this research project, a number of white ground fish were collected in the Caribbean, both Spanish-speaking and English-speaking countries. And these fish samples were sent to our laboratory at the University of the West Indies, Mona. And these were analyzed for pesticide residues and other toxic chemicals. And 42 pesticides were detected. We use standard methods from Canada. This method is called the GLAIR, Great Lakes Institute of Environmental Research. And it's interesting to note that these 42 pesticides were found in almost all the individual samples that we collected at ppb levels and lower. So these pesticides, a number of them include persistent organic pollutant. Other toxic chemical includes dioxins, furans, and PCBs. And it is interesting to note that most of these toxic chemicals have been banned, but we're still able to detect these toxic chemicals in the seafood samples that we have analyzed. In addition to that project, the university has been involved in the Global Monitoring Project, which also involves not just seafoods, but a number of other matrices, right? And more recently, mercury was included as one of the analytes. So currently, we have been analyzing for mercury using AAS, the cold vapor method. And interestingly, we found mercury in many of the seafood samples, both samples from the research project and also from commercial clients. Another thing that we found very interesting, that a number, well, food additives have been used over the years, like monosodium glutamate and synthetic food colorants. These have been used in preparing the food. But we also find that when we analyze some of these seafoods, before food preparations, we are able to detect some of these synthetic food colorants. And of course, I mentioned already pesticide residue. So some seafood can become contaminated with natural and human-derived environmental toxicants. Lead, in most cases, is one such toxicant. So even though we're not focusing on lead and arsenic and cadmium and so on, these analytes have been detected in a number of the seafood samples, again, from research projects as well as from commercial samples. Now, PCBs and furans and dioxins persist for many years. And even though PCBs have been banned, these have been used in transformer oils, cutting fluids, and so on. These have been persisting in the environment, and still we're still able to detect those in many matrices, to include seafoods. So the methods that we use are atomic absorption spectrophotometer, or photometry. And so lead, arsenic, cadmium, and so on, and mercury are analyzed by AAS. Mercury We tend to get better results using whole vapor when analyzing mercury. So AAS whole vapor is the method of choice for mercury. It should be noted that under international project, 2 mercury analyzers were donated to Jamaica. And so there are at least 2 mercury analyzers in Jamaica. And these have been used for the analysis of mercury in seafoods. ICP-MS is used for many heavy metals, and Jamaica has ICP-MS. At the University of the West Indies, we do not have ICP-MS at the moment, but we look forward to having that instrument in our lab within another year or so. Dioxins and furans and PCBs, we analyze those using gas chromatography, using the electron capture detector, and we also use Ciguatera and scombratoxin testing. These are done using high performance liquid chromatography, right? So I've mentioned about these already, the dioxins and furans. There are 209 congeners. And so one of these challenges we face is procuring the reference standards. And as an accredited lab with expiration date,
It seems as if we have lost our presenter, Dr. Raymond Reed. We apologize for that. He may have experienced some technical challenges, and so our apologies. We will seek to make contact with him. He's coming back on. All right, fine. So sorry for that break in programming. Dr. Reed is back on and seeking to identify his slide, and we'll be right back with you. You are mute. You're still muted, Dr. Reed. Just unmute and speak.
okay.
All right, fine. We're hearing you, we're seeing you, and you just need to put your slide into presentation mode.
It's in the presentation mode now. Are you hearing?
It is. We are hearing you, and it is in presentation mode. You're at fish sample testing analytical methods at this point.
All right, thank you very much. So I was saying that there are 209 congeners, and so it's difficult to procure those standards and have them stored and waiting on clients. So we usually procure upon request. It should be noted, thanks, Mr. Gooden, right, that the Bureau of Standards recently acquired the ICP MS, and that will, I know, contribute significantly to the testing capacity of Jamaica. So I indicated that for the Ciguatera and sprumprotoxin, we use the ELISA and HPLC method, and we have those at we have the capability at the University of the West Indies. Currently, we have LCMS, but we have some issues, but we're hoping to get a new LCMS before the year end, and so that will put us back on track to analyze for these marine toxin to hopefully, and again, by the end of the year. Again, the limitation that we have is unavailability of reference standards, but with due notice or proper notice, we'll be able to procure those and have the service available to the public. All right, so in closing, I just want to leave some references and some journals that you can use as reference regarding toxins in food. So I just want to thank the Bureau of Standards Jamaica for allowing me this opportunity to present. And I thank you, viewers, participants, for taking the time out to listen to me. And I also, most of all, last but not least, thank God for the opportunity to present. I now hand over to the moderator. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. And thank you, Miss Alison Richards, the food safety girl. Can I just see some recognition and appreciation for our presenters this morning in the chat? If you could just share some fire emojis, if we can just light up the place. It's a little bit hot on the outside. And we know that one of our favorite utility companies will be making big bucks this year, if it is that we are not on the high seas trying to catch some of these exotic seafoods. But thank you for your presentations. Both presentations certainly have enriched our understanding of the science and responsibility behind seafood safety. We are going to move into our question and answer segment. I'm going to remind us that we're asking persons to observe the following guidelines. Use a raise hand feature. If you'd like to ask a question, we'll acknowledge you in turn. Remain muted unless you're actively speaking. If your camera is on, please be mindful of your background to avoid distractions or any embarrassments for you or for us. Silence or monitor your mobile devices to keep the environment as focused as possible. Again, you may also share your questions via the chat, and team members will share them on your behalf. Now, immediately after Alice's presentation, CH, and I forgot the rest, Chanceline, there you go. Chanceline was the first person who raised her hand, and I'm going to ask both Dr. Reed and Ms. Richards, if you can, please come on camera, on video, if you are able to, so at least we can see you as you respond to the questions. And I'm going to offer Chanceline the opportunity. Chanceline Brown, I hope I'm calling your name properly, and do forgive me if I've erred, but I'm asking you, Chancellor, to go ahead with your question. You did indicate at the end of Alison's presentation, your hand was raised.
Okay, thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. My question, I'd already typed it in the chat, but I'll just read it. What is being done by Bureau of Standards with the Fisheries Department regulation? I don't know if you'd like me to ask all three questions or wait for a response from the first one.
Well, if I might just respond, and when you say what is being done by the Bureau of Standards in relation to the regulations, could you be a little bit more specific for us?
Right. So the other two questions are spot checks being done with the fishermen and women across the island? And the part three, are the beaches visited and spot checks done to ensure fish are stored in the igloo or on ice after they are caught?
All right. So if I might just respond to that, the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, even when it was a regulator, did not have responsibility or oversight for this. This would be the National Fisheries Authority, I believe, or there might be some other entity through the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, and Mining that would have that responsibility. So while the Bureau of Standards may assist with development of standards, generally speaking, and standards that persons can utilize, it would not be the remit of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica at this point to undertake that. I think that question may best, or that would best be handled by the National Fisheries Authority. There is a body, I think it is on Marcus Garvey Drive, and if there's anybody from that entity on, then they could respond to that. Outside of that, we would not be able to give a response beyond this.
Okay, my thoughts were that Bureau of Standard governs most of the things that have to do with like the food and different other things that we do, businesses and stuff.
Well, the
So
Bureau,
although there's a fishery regulatory department, as you just explained, I would like to know if the Bureau of Standard, or you said you have set probably some guidelines and stuff. Is there anyone at any point in time that checks in to ensure that these things are being
all right.
practiced?
So just to say that the BSJ as a standards development entity will set standards, and we partner with several entities, individuals, experts, persons in academia to establish standards. Sometimes organizations will assist. However, the Bureau of Standards does not regulate. So let me just reiterate that. And I do see Winthrop Marshall with his hand up, and I'm going to just ask him if he's from the entity and able to respond, then he could. But the BSJ would not be, and we would not be able to determine or to speak on that matter here as to the level of coverage that they currently undertake.
Okay, thank
Okay.
you.
Yes,
Okay, yes. Good
Mr.
morning.
Mr. Marsden, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning, colleagues. Dr. Marsden here from the Veterinary Services Division. Just to let you know that the Ministry of Health, in regards to that, that's a function of the Ministry of Health. They are the ones that are aligned mostly with food safety and the purchase and the approval of fishery products going in the market for consumption. The Veterinary Service Division, we carry out a lot of regulatory checks basically on the processing facilities and the fishing vessels. We're the ones who also approve, along with Fisheries Division, the fishing grounds of which they harvest. We are the only entity currently that does things like biotoxin testings on all the lobsters and conch. And if we do have issues with cyclotoxins, the Veterinary Service Division also has the capability of checking for cyclotoxins. If not, we do have related laboratories, international laboratories that we can subcontract. So that is what we do, the Fisheries Division does, and the Ministry of Health.
Thank you very much for that intervention. We recognize Brian Murray and ask you, Mr. Brian Murray, to go ahead and speak.
Hi, good morning. Can you hear me?
Hearing you.
wonderful. Thank you for my colleague from the veterinary services, but I should make a correction. Is now the National Fisheries Authority, formerly the Fisheries Division. So yes, along with our colleagues, we do assist in the measure of inspection, especially with regards to the industrial vessels. In terms of the visit to the fishing beaches, yes, that is done by the Ministry of Health. In that regard, what we would also do is, and this is where it comes on to our relations with our fishery, our officials, and even our fish farmers. We encourage them to pursue a food handler's permit, along with also doing their due diligence in post-harvest handling. So where we observe certain practices such as the certain storage of how they store their fish, how they handle it right after it's caught, whether it be via fish pods or spear diving, we encourage them to carry as much ice as possible. Because as soon as the fish is harvested, we know that it starts to spoil. So we encourage them to engage, even if it's the dirty use of ice wherever they are.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Murray. We appreciate the response. Are there other questions? I'm seeing a question from Michael Rodriguez. Are tests for toxins done before customers devour the fish? And is that question for the chemistry area at UE? Are you asking Dr. Reed? Because that really might be a question for the retailers, for the distributors. They would be, I'm not sure that the representatives here, Allison or Raymond, would be able to respond. They might be able to give some responses, but it would not be in their forte per se, as they are not involved in the harvesting and sale of. Moya Campbell? Moya, please go ahead. I'm not sure if Moya, if you're speaking, Moya, you need to unmute. But if not, we're going to just go ahead and ask Winthrop Marsden to go ahead and to present.
Okay, the veterinary services, along with the National Fisheries Authority, we do have a monitoring program at the Pedro Bank, where we do have surveillance, where we do take water samples, fishery samples, and seagrass samples, and we do have a continuous monitoring program for all biotoxins that are there. We also do quality check on the products as well as water for microbes. And this is a continuous program. We use this program to then advise the fisheries, National Fisheries Authority, in regards to the opening, closing of the season. And also the Pedro Bank is marked into grids, in which if we do find that there are potential biotoxins outbreak or anything of such, the potentials are there to close off sections of the bank and also to do monitoring. It is something that is done between both agencies, and it has been going on from 1999, if I can recall. So we do have a program. In regards to cyclotoxins, we do not do a monitoring program. That is usually through the Ministry of Health. Usually, if there are signs of patients exhibiting sign of cyclotoxin poisoning, then investigation tend to be done through the Ministry of Health with the other related agencies.
Thank you, Dr. Marzin. Thank you. Deidre, Miss Deidre Taylor who is acting as manager of the Quality Institute, I'm going to ask you to just comb through the chat and identify if there are any questions there. And while we are not at the point of thanks yet, we do have to acknowledge the very hard work of Miss Deidre Taylor and her team at the Quality Institute of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica for bringing to us these very interesting educational sessions. They have been very beneficial, and certainly as I prepared to moderate, it really has allowed a lot of learning. And even as I listen to presentations from session to session, I learned so much more. So if there are questions in the chat, and I did see somebody inquiring about the conch season in Jamaica.
Hi, Ellis. Yes, so it's really the last question about conch and asking about the mercury analyzers that Dr. Reed referenced. Those are the last two questions. The others would have been addressed, including requests for the presentations.
All right, fine, thanks. So Dr. Reed, would you be able to speak to mercury analyzers in Jamaica? Can the names? All right, so I'm figuring the person might be asking where they would be able to contact or utilize the services of these mercury analyzers. Am I correct, Moya? Yes, it seems so. Dr. Reed, are you able to respond to that?
Okay, one, I was informed that one was at the Environmental Ed Lab, and I think Mr. Dakin or Dr. Mars, they might be able to tell us, confirm if there's one at the Veterinary Services Division.
Thank you very much. Dr. Marsden, are you able to confirm? If you're able to, that would be good. And
yes, Mr. Dakins will answer for me.
all right, Errol Dakin, you are acknowledged. Please proceed.
Two things. First, the mercury analyzer. We have a mercury analyzer, but presently it is not working. Right? But we have purchased basically 2 mercury analyzers in this lab. Right? We also have an instrument that can do mercury separate from a mercury analyzer, which is furnace analyzer, right? But that instrument is also down. Question for Dr. Reed, though. Dr. Reed, you mentioned about a lot of compounds like pesticides and biotoxins. You mentioned lead levels, lead and mercury that are being tested for, but you didn't mention the levels and how they're related to the tolerance that was available.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dakin. So our duty really is to report what we find and not necessarily to correlate the results. So the levels are usually, for AAS, it's close to the detection limit, which is most time around about 0.1 ppm. And for some elements, we were able to go down to ppb levels, but not below that. When we subcontract to our clients who use ICP-MS, we are able to get concentration below ppb levels.
It's based on the matrix that we're talking about. Because
Yes.
the tolerance level, for example, in fish is different from the tolerance level in something like lobster or conch.
Right.
So
So
yeah.
it is based on the individual matrix, individual matrix.
So did you find that these levels were above international tolerance, or were they below? I just wanted to know.
All right. So when we check the literature, it is our concentration was always below the levels reported elsewhere, with the exception of lead, which we're not placing, well, lead in another matrix. So for instance, we found lead in blood, and the concentration is among the highest in the world, right? But not lead in seafood. The lead concentration in seafood, I would say it's round about what we are seeing in the literature, or less.
So you're saying that our stuff is safe then, our seafood is safe, relatively?
I'm not.
From the compounds that you analyze.
From where I sit as an analyst, Mr. Dakins, I just report. So I'm not able to say, the impact, or to say whether or not it is safe. Because one has to look at bioaccumulation, as Ms. Richard would have mentioned. How often do we eat seafood, or the seafood in question? How often? And then you have to look at age, you have to look at sex, a lot of other factors, the lifespan, over a lifespan of 70 years, how much will accumulate and what effect will it have on each person? And this, I think, in my opinion, will vary. So I'm not in a position to speak to that. It's just, I can only speak to the results that we generate.
All right. I want
Thank
to
you.
ask Ms. Alison Richard a question about her presentation. Can I go ahead?
Since you're on the floor, we recognize Dr. Marsden as well. So please go ahead with your question, Mr. Dakin, and then Dr. Marsden.
Alison mentioned something about conch feeding on other mollusks or something like that. I'd like to ask her about that specifically in terms of, is that in the literature? Because I've never seen that. Conch is supposed to be an herbivore, eating on the microalgae. So I don't understand that particular statement. Could you elaborate for me, please?
Thanks for your question, Errol. I think the only thing I recall in terms of, I referred to predatory gastropods.
Conch included, or it was other gastropod apart from a conch. Conch is a marine gastropod, and
I'm going back to the slide because I don't believe I had an example of the gastropod there. But just give me a sec, let me pull it back up.
And while Alice is doing that, while Alice is seeking to confirm that, I'm going to ask Dr. Marsden to go ahead. I don't know if his response was to questions asked earlier. So please go ahead, Dr. Marsden.
Yes, thank you. It was related to a question, and I see it in the chat in regards to the opening of the conch season. Just for educational purposes, Mr. Moria, I'm not sure if he's still here, but usually to open the conch season, the National Fisheries Authority usually do what they call a conch abundance survey program, in which they have to go out there and do a survey. The survey will determine the quantity, or the quantity for to be harvested. And then after that is completed, the veterinary services do their risk assessment to determine whether or not the conch is safe in regards to biotoxins. Once those parameters are favorable, then the National Fisheries Authority will then send out their notice for persons to send in their application for conch quota. Once a conch quota is issued, then they are allowed to harvest. Usually, the conch season opens around officially opens around February, I think, right? And harvesting is only done when the quota is issued and it is gazetted. That can probably take up around another month. So usually you can say it officially, harvesting season can officially start around March. And it ends in July.
Thank you for your response, Dr. Marsden. Dr. Gooden, if you'll just hold, let me just go back to Ms. Richards. Alice, now you're now able to respond, and can we just complete that question for Mr. Dakin?
Yes, so he is right. The conch would not be included in the predatory gastropods group.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Dakin. Thank you so much for listening out and for your quick observation of that. We acknowledge that. Dr. Gooden, you are acknowledged. You may present.
Right. So I just wanted to make a comment in relation to the impact of climate change and the way that it is impacting our fish stocks, both now and perhaps more so in the future as events unfold. Now, there are at least two ways that I can think of that even though we are a small island developing state, we still need to be aware of the greater impact of climate change. As temperatures, well, let me start first in terms of CO2 and other green gases building up in the environment in response to the burning of fossil fuels, and in particular CO2. Now, as CO2 levels rise in the atmosphere, they tend to be absorbed by aquatic waters, causing the aquatic waters in general to become more acidic. So you can imagine over time, this may have an adverse impact on especially shellfish. I mean, conch, lobster, and so forth. Because these aquatic species generally rely on the exoskeleton, the shells, and so forth to protect themselves. So if this phenomenon continues, we can expect it to have an impact on the fish stocks, and we may have to go further and further out at sea in order to get meaningful commercial quantities of these for local consumption and also for export. The other impact also with the rising temperatures, I think we are likely to see more the advent of algae blooms. And some of these algae, as was reported in the presentations, are the source from many of these biotoxins. And so to the extent that they proliferate in the seawaters with the rising temperatures, we can expect maybe the frequency of reporting of high levels of these biotoxins in the commercial species of interest to become more of a concern. So,
given the comments you have just made, Dr. Gooden,
yes,
what mitigating steps can we take as a small island developing state? How do we, and I mean, we are a small speck in the global picture, but what can we do to protect, or to, if we envision this for our future, what can we do to mitigate, to minimize, to help our farmers, our fisher folk, to help our people manage this? Do you have any
we
recommendations for how
are
we go forward?
yes, thanks for that question. Notwithstanding our small size, we are a contributor to the carbon levels in the environment, right? And so our own practices in terms of, burning of, garbage, burning of the, deforestation and the burning of coal, which is a local fuel type that we use. We have seen the impact of that in countries like Haiti and so forth. So yes, that's important. Another way is that we do have a voice in the international community in terms of standards relating to carbon levels and the trading of carbon levels, which have become carbon credits, that have become very popular. So a lot of the developed countries, what they do is that they're able to trade carbon levels carbon credits, and these are many times tied to to projects and so forth. However,
but Dr.
it's
Gooden, I'm going to be facetious and say,
yes,
as a small voice, and you say, yes, we do have a voice at the standards table, but the
yes,
reality is when it really boils down to me and to Alison and to the fisherman down at Greenwich Park, really and truly, what do we say to him? How does this make a difference? What can we help him in terms of if it's a generation of fisher folk passing down from grandfather to father to son? How do we say to them, this is what you can do, or this is what is likely to happen for you in a real way?
well, they have a voice. They would observe the burning of uncontrolled burning of garbage in their communities. They also would see the uncontrolled burning of wood from depletion of the forest areas. So it might seem small, but
So they
cumulatively,
have to make a change. They have to say to their neighbors, they have to say to others,
behavioral
hey,
change.
let us stop doing this. And maybe
Yes,
it is that entities responsible for monitoring will have to be a little bit more serious with the way we monitor and enforce regulations that speak to some of these things.
right. And just one last comment. Often when we travel along the road leading out to the Palisados Airport, we see these boulders being stacked up against the shoreline. And for many persons, traversing these corridors, it means very little. But it is a very visible signal that, we are anticipating rising sea levels. And the truth is, if the sea levels rise maybe a meter or more, most of downtown would be jeopardized, would be in serious risk of flooding. So we can't ignore at a personal level the impact of climate change, both in terms of from a food security perspective, as well as how it will impact the economy going forward, given also that we are highly tourism dependent in order to support our economy.
I think more and more people are in fact recognizing, and although we are not always taking active steps, I think people are facing the reality that the environment and the way we take care of the environment is really going to be critical to what kind of world, what kind of country we leave for our children and grandchildren. But thank you for these comments, Dr. Goodner. I appreciate it. We appreciate the questions that have come, and while not always directed for Alison and Raymond, we thank those persons who participated and certainly wish to acknowledge in a very special way Dr. Marsden for his interventions, along with Mr. Murray and Mr. Dakin for their comments and responses to some of the issues raised. Ladies and gentlemen, it has really been a very good day. Deirdre, you will let me know in terms of evaluation. Is there an evaluation form that you will send to persons? You can just let me know. But as we seek to bring this session to a close, let me thank all of you. And currently I'm seeing 133 persons online. Let me thank each of you for your attendance and your participation today. You have contributed to what has been a rich and certainly a timely discussion. We thank the Food Safety Girl and Dr. Raymond Reed for their presentations. So to Alison Richards and to Dr. Raymond Reed for their presentations, to Mr. Farah Smith and to Dr. Velton Gooden for their remarks at the start of the event, to all of the persons who participated, to Mr. Kimo McCullough, who led on the technical team. Thank you very much. I said earlier, and I reiterate, our sincere gratitude to Ms. Deirdre Taylor and her team at the Quality Institute of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica for their foresight, for their vision in creating this very important food safety series, really very beneficial. Again, ladies and gentlemen, today's webinar comes just days before World Food Safety Day on June 7. We spoke about this under the theme Food Safety Science in Action. What we have heard today affirms that food safety is not an abstract ideal. It is rooted in science. It is backed by data and carried out every day by people like you, or food handlers, or fisher folk, or producers, or processors, or regulators, and or educators. And every one of us, each of us, is impacted. We invite you to continue working with the Bureau of Standards Jamaica. For training, our Quality Institute offers a wide range of relevant and accessible programs. Reach out to Ms. Deidre Taylor and her team to find out how we can assist your organizations. For testing services, our chemistry laboratory stands ready to support your needs. We can test for environmental pollutants such as heavy metals, arsenic, lead, chromium, manganese, copper, silver, iron, zinc. Mercury is possible. However, we are still working through some issues with that. Like I think it was Mr. Dakin who indicated a similar situation. But the chemistry laboratory of the Bureau of Standards Jamaica, you can also reach out to Dr. Reilly Dunkley and his team for support. So whether you're conducting product analysis, meeting regulatory requirements, or verifying environmental or food safety parameters, the BSJ's chemistry laboratory is here to help. Other laboratories, including the microbiology laboratory and the packaging branch, stand ready to guide you and support you in your endeavors. Ladies and gentlemen, let us continue to raise the standard for our safety, our health, and our future. Thank you again for being with us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinar. And this is where we drop anchor for the day. This is where we dock for today. Have a safe and productive day. We appreciate you being here today.